In this episode of Financial Model Detective, I want to talk to you about the treatment of inflation in project finance models. Like everything else that I have shared with you on this channel before, this one is also inspired by true stories. So one of the questions that sometimes I come across is whether to include or not to include inflation in your financial model and in your projections. And to me, that's just an obvious thing that inflation is a reality that you need to include in your financial model and in your projections. However, people came to me with some, reasoning saying that, inflation is uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen to the macroeconomics and all that story. So this is, to me, is not justified because everything that is included in the financial model, even if it is backed up by contract, there is some level of uncertainty attached to everything. And when it comes to inflation, it's very important to include inflation because if you don't include inflation and you have taxes that you need to pay on that project, and then this is based on the depreciation, then you are basically not calculating your depreciation correctly, and it's going to end up with an overestimation or an underestimation of your taxes. So that's something that you definitely want to include inflation in your financial model. However, if you want to reflect, your tariff, if you want to reflect anything in real basis, meaning that excluding inflation, then you can also do that by deflating, the tariff or deflating the revenues and express it in real terms. However, not including inflation in your model might end up in wrong calculation. And I have found a very nice article about this by someone which is a very brilliant guy by the name of John Cheong-Holdaway. And I have put the link here for you. I'm going to publish this blog post. And he has a very nice article where he explained exactly with table, with an example and extracts from a financial model, why you should be including inflation in your projections if you have taxes. Okay, so I'm going to put the link here for you. You go and check it out. And we are not going to waste time on that because John has already explained it very well. And I also contacted John on LinkedIn, and I also advise you to go and check him out. It's a very brilliant guy, and we discussed about this problem with inflation. By the way, this topic, I got the idea for this topic from also a friend of mine, a very good friend, a dear friend called Perry Fisher. He's also a colleague. He's also a very good financial modeler. And I advise you to go and check him out. His website is taurobiz.com. I'm going to put the link. And he also has a YouTube channel where he explains issues related to financial modeling, and he's specialized in mining, but he also has a lot of materials on financial modeling, and he's also a very good musician. So I just recommend that you go and check him out. So let's go back to our topic. And so once you know that you need to include inflation in your financial model, then the next step is to gather information in order for you to be able to include inflation in your financial model. So the first step is to get the information. For that, this is during the data collection, you need to ask this question for each and every item that goes into your financial model, whether it's an inflow or whether it's an outflow. You need to ask the question, what is the currency of denomination of this item? In other words, what is the currency of invoicing for the cash flow item? Whether it's a capital expenditure or whether it's an operating expenses or whether it's a revenue, then you need to ask what is the currency, how you're going to pay it, okay? Whether it's going to be in euros, it's going to be in dollars, it's going to be in rupees, what's the currency? And then once you know that, you need to reflect that in the financial model and reflect it in the currency of denomination, in the currency of invoicing, and then convert it to the model currency. Okay, that's very important. If not, you cannot do any sensitivities on inflation. Okay, so step one is to, in the data collection phase, when you're in the data collection, you need to go and ask this question, or go to the project document, or go to the developer and ask them for this information for each and every cash flow item. Here in the blog, I put you two of the example of the typical questions that I always ask when I'm building a financial model, to have this information so that I can include it in my financial models. And also, by the way, in my book, The Financial Model Detective, at the end, I have a list of typical questions to ask when you are auditing or reviewing a financial model. I recommend you to go and check it out. Many of these questions are related to this currency of denomination, escalation rate, and the reference date for each of the cash flow item. So what you need, the information that you need, is the amount of the each expenses. You need the currency of invoicing. You also need the reference date. It's very important, because let's say that today you are building a financial model and today you receive a quotation from a contractor. Okay, but this quotation has a date, right? It is January, let's say 2022. It is March 2022. But what if, the financial close happens in 2 years' time? What if the financial close happens in 1 year time? Whether you still can have that same price, or you need to apply an escalation, whether you need to adjust it by inflation maybe in order to reflect the real price. So that's why you need to have the reference date, and you also need to know whether you need to apply any escalation rate or not. The same thing applies to OPEX as well. For each operating item, you need to know what is the reference date for that estimation. So today you know that insurance will cost you like 1 million per year. Okay, so first of all, you need to ask yourself, from this quotation that I have till my operation, commercial operation date, whether that price still remains the same, or whether you need to inflate it. Okay, and then from that commercial operation date, let's say that you are making projections for 20 years, whether you can assume the same price over 20 years, or you need to apply an escalation. And if yes, what is that rate? Okay, so these are basically the questions that you need to answer here. And once you have the answer, we're going to go to the next step, which is building it into your financial model. Okay, now we are in Excel. So this is the input sheet in one of my financial models. So as you can see, I'm going to show you first the capital expenditure, the expenses during construction. So as you can see here, for each, I have different categories. I have costs which are in euros, costs which are in dollars, and costs which are in rubles. Okay, so all of this, I have the option to activate each of these cost with this currency. And I also have another input, which is the base date or the reference date, and the annual escalation rate. Okay, so these are the important information that I have. And so today I have only euro amounts, but maybe tomorrow some of these items are going to be denominated. I'm going to maybe hire a US based contractor and I need to pay them in US dollar, so I need to reflect that in US dollar. Or in local currency, I might have a local content in my EPC, in my capital expenditure. So I need to also have the flexibility in my financial model to reflect these different currency that I will be considering for my contractors. Okay, so we're going to do the same exact thing, but for the operating expenses, I have the different categories of variable and fixed O&M. I'm going to have one option for the fixed in local currency, another one for the variable expenses, and fixed expenses both in local currency and in euros. So these are the options that I want to include and consider in my financial model. For this one, I don't have it should be a solar project, so I don't have any kind of variable expenses. Everything is fixed, so I have a local content, and then the remaining is foreign content, and it's denominated in euros. And I also have an escalation rate that I need to apply to these expenses, with the base date being June 2022. Okay, so once I have this information, I can calculate all these expenses and reflect the right escalation rate to each of them. The choice of the escalation rate that you apply can be different depending on the nature of your expenses. Some of them, it might be like just inflation, so you need to make projections, inflation projections. Or it might be based on a contract. So you have signed an O&M contract, and the contractor is telling you, it's in the contract that, you know, every year you need to increase my price by 5%, by 2%. So some of them are contractual. Some of them, the escalations depend on the macroeconomics, meaning the inflation, consumer price index, producer price index. So depending on the macroeconomic factors, okay? So this is it. We are not going to go into the detail of how to calculate, because that should be straightforward. I just wanted you to have a view of what should be included in the financial model. If you have any questions or you want me to expand on this topic, please let me know. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you and bye. If you want to learn how to build better financial models, check out my online course on financial model spreadsheet design at courses.phoenixmode.com.